well, since I'm a horrible social media person, thanks for getting in touch with Jimmy and having him tell me to do this.
It was, our husbands are very similar, I could tell. Fred would do the same thing. And Fred and Jimmy are both very excited that, this is happening. They're actually on other panels, I think, right now. Well, cool. But yeah, I was just asking everyone, is there a story you want to share about what it means to be women in comics? Good stories, bad stories, whatever your feelings are about it, or it's irrelevant to you. Just anything on that subject,
Okay, I mean, I don't know if you guys have already started.
No,
you're the first.
You're the first.
I'm the first?
Yeah.
I'm the first. Uh-oh. The funny thing is both of my parents were artists, right? So I always had stuff to draw on when I was, when I was tiny. And I grew up and I really decided I wanted to do comic books. Now, my dad also decided he wanted to do comic books when he was a kid, but his parents discouraged him because at the time, you don't grow up to be a comic book artist, you'll starve, So he was talked out of being a comic book artist when he was a kid. He went into art direction and, creative directing for advertisements and stuff like that. But when I decided I wanted to be a comic book artist, he was very encouraging, which was great, which a lot of people, a lot of people have now, but a lot of people my age didn't have back then. It was the same old, you're going to starve to death. And when I went to the Hubert School, cartooning and graphic art. Joe Hubert told us that we were all going to have the worst time getting into the industry because it was such a tiny industry.
No, you mean just everybody in the class?
Everybody in the class, boys and girls and everybody. Yeah.
Can everybody hear Amanda? Should I give her a microphone? Do you guys okay?
I'm pretty loud, right?
Yeah,
You're loud.
Okay. So I went in with the the mindset that this is going to be really, really hard, and I'm going to have to just be bullheaded about it until they give me a job. And if I did get any pushback about being female, I didn't notice it because I was just like, oh yeah, this is what Joe was talking about. It's going to be really hard to get in. So that was like, I sort of went in thinking I was going to have the worst time getting into comics. And I did go to Marvel and DC about 5 or 6 times before I wore them down and they finally gave me my first backup story. So yeah, if I've ever had pushback about being a woman in comics, I've sort of been blissfully unaware of it, which is, I guess, fortunate for me. The only time I ever heard any flack about it was when I went into a comic book store. And it was, it was one of the comic book stores that, of horror, of like horror legends. It was like boxes everywhere. It smelled like mold. It was just, and the guys in it, and they're like, oh look, hey, how you doing?
And you start to back out slowly, right?
No, I wanted to buy comics. I didn't back out at all. I was like, they're like, so what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to break into drawing comics, and they just started laughing.
Really?
Girl, I started breaking into comics, and I was like, and then I walked out of there thinking, you know what? I'm going to show them.
Yes, right. And they're going to hear this today, recorded, and they're going to be like, I knew it, I always knew. They're reading your comics. It's just the best.
So yeah, that's been my experience. So it's been good. I can't complain. I like what I do.
Well, and it's similar too, right? Like breaking out and breaking in and continuing your work is a challenge for everybody. Very cool. Any other thoughts based on the women in comics thoughts or labels or phrases or?
My experience is pretty much like yours.
It's very same.
I mean, I had support through the industry, but like the comic shops were just bless your heart. That's so cute.
Wow, see,
very, very similar. I didn't have familial support with art. I just kind of said, screw you guys, I'm doing it. So I'm kind of a bitch.
I think I'm kind of a bitch is pretty cool. Yeah, all right.
Well, because I'm the crone here, I go all the way back to, the 1970, and I did not have support at all. I got no support from nobody except the only other woman who was drawing comics in San Francisco, who also was shut out of the underground comics industry. It was definitely a male clique, and they didn't want us. But I just, like you, I just said, fuck that, and So, and like everyone else here, I love what I do. I write comics, I write histories of women cartoonists. I'm in heaven. I love sitting there at that computer and writing.
Good for you.
Coming in as a fan instead of a hardcore creator, I had the same comic book store experience. I have my comic store, which is awesome, but I've gone to a couple others looking for specific issues of various things. And there's one I walked in and I was looking for a back issue of one of the Farscape comics. And they're
Two
like...
negatives against you.
Yeah. Oh well. And they're like, well, we don't really have anything that you would be interested in at all. And they just had that vibe of, you don't belong here.
We have nothing for you here.
Yeah,
like in that film.
Go away.
Yeah.
These are not the books you're looking for. But you shouldn't get that reference. You're a chick, you're not allowed to know it.
I know. It's really interesting to me that, just hearing you guys from the industry, that there's support in the industry and not from the fan base, is fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, and also, you just did an interview with Marguerite, right? And you were saying, I could see a lot of it was in your head, just even when we talked today. What were some of the things that she was saying that for you were just like,
Well, we talked a lot about what she's doing, obviously. But as far as being a woman in comics, it's just don't be afraid is the big thing that she was saying. Go out and do your thing. Don't let the gatekeepers and the guys tear you down, because you love what you love, and that's awesome.
Or just be blissfully ignorant and just keep going.
yeah, keeping going in the FU, that's for the children. Yeah, that's very exciting to hear. Now, Hannah, you've covered this a lot, and you've done a lot of articles. Your site has done a lot of articles on this too. So, having seen so many different sides of these conversations, gosh, what do you think?
Well, my first response that pops into my mind is actually a selfish one from my own experience, just as a comics fan and then becoming a journalist. I was in academia for a long time where it wasn't at all unusual to be a female professor, and fairly comfortable in that way. But then when I decided to become a journalist in comics specifically, I'd attend events and there'd be groups of reporters, all men, and I'd walk up and say hi and just, awkward silence. Let's go out for a drink. Nah. And then I'd find out that they were all meeting up.
Yeah.
So there was just a social thing. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm paranoid, but I went through this a lot. It was out of the comfort zone of male groups of journalists to have one female there, just one. Now, if there'd been more, it might have kind of diversified it a bit. It would have been okay. Things have gotten better over time. Mainly the other women I know in journalism are actually quite high-ranking. But what we really need are more of every kind of reporter and every kind of writer.
And women editors and women
Just
publishers.
women creators, because it's the
creators.
same in the podcast sphere. Like if you come up to Podcast Peak upstairs and look at the tables, every person there who's generally behind the mic, except for Michelle and I. Michelle is one of my co-hosts over there, and most of them are male, and Michelle and I are behind the mic interviewing people like Marguerite and a bunch of other awesome creators. It's like, okay, hey, we're the ladies here. This is awkward.
Yeah.
I relate to what you just said so much. The guys, let's talk about the 70s and 70s and the 80s. Yeah, well, the guys, we just said going out and drinking, they would go out and drink with their buddies, and they'd say, oh, yeah, I hear that, Marvel is looking for a backup artist for this, this 5-page story in the back of the Hulk or whatever the hell, and they give their pals the jobs. Nobody gave me jobs, nobody sent me anywhere, nobody went out drinking with me. It was all the guys. So I so relate. And they never knew what to say to me. They were nice to me. They were polite, but they never knew what to say to me.
And it's not necessarily they mean bad. It's the lack of experience, so they're not socially able to transition very easily. It takes a lot of trying to get used to it.
Thank you so much.
Actually, I wanted to ask Trina, I was like, was there ever a point where you finally felt like there was an acceptance for you? Like do you remember when, there was finally, they're not shunning me
No,
like I'm a leper?
I think they still don't accept me.
Really?
Yeah.
We love you though.
You love me. And I love you, Amanda.
Well, even in the conversation about the panel today, Christopher, who found us a room and got us all going, and Bruce was really excited that we're doing this happening. Kudos to the con for not shying away and proving action. And they really wanted us to have that conversation today. So it's what I've gotten to know just from Trina, just hanging out with you in the past 24 hours, is you're incredibly vocal, but it's exciting because I do see people listening and how you speak is changing them. So I just want to say that I saw the power of that. So thank you for always speaking your mind. So Joelle's right here by me, but I'm like over her with this mic. It's crazy. But I mean, my gosh, you're so talented and so doing so many beautiful things. Can you talk a little bit about, just your experience in the industry, how you feel like it's going, what you're excited by, anything like that?
Yeah, it's going okay, I think. Yeah, it's fine. My experience, I feel the same way. I really haven't gotten any, maybe I've been blissfully unaware as well. I've been really lucky. I've gotten a lot of support in the industry. I feel like the thing that I mostly take notice of is in interviews, I always get asked about being a woman.
Yep.
It drives me bananas. I'm tired of the conversation with interviewers. And then, I feel like sometimes it's like this girl ghetto set of questions where it's like, well, ask me about my artwork or what I'm working on or what I'm doing. I'm more interested in talking about that anyway.
I think we all are, and this kind of gets in the way for us, but we have to own it because it's part of who we are and our identity, and it gets complicated. But do you find that the conversation, for me as a player, it always ends up being like, well, I just didn't know women could do those kinds of things, kind of a feeling, and that's where I'm like, where have you been? Have you walked outside?
No, I try not to get to me too much because I know that the interviewers are asking out of a genuine curiosity and wanting to get women out there and talk about women. It just so happens, after a while it gets exhausting, and you just want to talk about everything beyond that, like what you're actually doing for a living and what you care about. So yeah, it's a fine line to walk of, I really want to be a bitch about this question, but you've got to be nice, and I get it. It comes from a nice place, but oh my God, it's just exhausting.
I think also making that point to them too, that you're a little tired of the conversation, but still having it is a very valid one as well. Like that, I think it's that curiosity and wanting to know is exciting. On our the panel we just did on diversity in pop culture, and being discriminated against in that sense. There also came up from that panel wanting this kind of thing on every panel. That inclusion just at every panel, no matter what the subject is, has a good diverse, group of authors and creators.
But, the other thing is that on that panel, it was a great panel, by the way, I'm sorry, you guys mostly missed it. We had an African-American guy, and he was passionate about being a person of color. We had a Latin guy who was passionate about being a person of color. I'm passionate about being a woman. 2 weeks ago, I was in New York at the first ever Queers in Comics conference. It was fantastic. It's one of the greatest experiences I've ever had, and one reason for that was because I was completely accepted. What I just said to you, Amanda, I do not feel accepted by the guys in the mainstream, but I was completely accepted at this conference, and these people didn't think they were pigeonholed. They owned what they were, and that's a very important part of what they are and what they do, and that's how I feel.
Right. That was history, and here we are in flash mob style. Things are happening. This was happening a few minutes ago. Questions? Does anyone have? Yeah.
So I've been a part of diversity panels just as a fan, and I'm really tired of not only are you talking about the exhaustion of being asked the 101 level. Whoa, women in comics.
Oh, yeah, well,
Women
that's...
are in comics. So what's the advanced level of the questions that have to do with your place in comics that are beyond the things that you get asked all the time?
Beyond the idiots, you mean?
Beyond the why you're a woman. That's exciting.
What is it seems to go back to, is it Joelle going back to what you were saying about about what you're doing, about who you are as a creator, more about the human interaction of what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if they're interviewing me, we're talking about the love of comics, talking about love of story making and storytelling, and I'd rather talk about that. But it is hard. I'd love to see more women and all that, and how do you get to that point without getting tedious questions? I don't know the answer.
I guess a good way to respond to that would be like sometimes people don't say, "Oh, what's it like to be a woman in comics?" They instead say, "What is it about being female that you might bring to your characters that a guy might not be able to bring to them?"
That's a great
that would be the advanced
That's interesting.
question. Yeah.
Yes, that's
Can you
great.
answer that question?
I think she will have a great answer.
Let's skip the 101. Let's skip straight to advanced women in comics.
Yeah. So you want to actually know the answer to that?
Yeah.
Well, I've been talking a lot. Does anybody want to know?
Well, you did. I remember also that you were talking about, Holly's voice. You kept talking about, you hear
Harley's voice.
Harley's
yeah.
voice, you hear it in
yeah.
a certain way, and I just wondered what that meant.
I think with Harley we were trying to give her, make her own person and, take her away from, it's the Joker's girlfriend thing, We wanted her to, be just awesome all by herself. And make her own new friends that aren't, as horrible as he is. They're horrible in their own ways. So, but yeah, that's what that's where we're going with Harley, and I think, and Jimmy does a lot of the writing on it, and I just feel like I feel her personality there, which hopefully doesn't get me put in a loony bin. But yeah,
Do you think being female is a part of that, or not?
it might be.
Oh, of course
It
it
might be,
is.
yeah.
Of
I
course
think
it
so.
is.
Yeah.
Look at all those women out there on the floor with their mallets,
Oh yeah. I've even seen
Desire.
guys out there with their mallets.
Yeah, all different. Everybody have weapons. That's what we can teach you from this panel. If you don't have a weapon already, go out and get one. Everybody. That's what unites us all. To take that a little bit further for Marguerite. I mean, these storylines that you're saying that take female characters and but you're bringing your own spin to it and history. Does that come from? Is any of your experience being female comes from your desire and drive to do that, or is that completely irrelevant?
I don't, you'd have to catch me like day by day writing. I mean, there are some days where I write from a place of revenge.
Yeah.
Those are the days, where, through my life, my gender's been made the most significant thing about me.
Oh, man.
By the world that we live in, by, the communities that I've been surrounded by.
What age do you think that started at?
I can't remember a time that it wasn't that way.
Wow.
First time I looked in a mirror?
Yeah.
Yeah, for most girls, it starts in elementary school. Or earlier, because, you're a girl.
And then it upgrades the first time a dude hollers, "Hey, sugar tits," out of the car window zooming by.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's when it starts.
You're like 11 or 12?
Yeah.
That's when it started for me, when I discovered that, I don't know what, I was not aware of a sudden physical change, but suddenly I was walking down the streets and guys were yelling at me. That's when it started.
So you want, it honestly varies day by day. Some days, I'm writing from a place of anger, where it's just really like, I'll show them. Some
Yeah.
days I get to write from a place of love, if it's an admiration for this character, or an admiration for, like I do a lot of co-writing, for the stories that we've created together. Some days you sort of write from a place of grief. I worked in childcare, like before I became like a full-time comics writer. And, seeing the girls that I took care of start to go through the same things that I did when I was a kid. And, the first time a guy hollers at her. And, you want to write a role model. You want to write a hero. Someone for her to enjoy or, for her to be able to look up to. So it really varies. But I want to say something, more hopeful than that. But
But you're making the point of that it does come back to the personal,
Yeah. Mhm.
and that the experience of being female has a part to do
Yes.
with that.
Uh-huh.
But it does come back to the personal, and that's where the questions can, in terms of someone asking about your work can get great is when they're personal.
Mhm.
I mean, I become such a jerk at this point. Sometimes I'm just like, I literally was up for a fellowship, and I was like, they're like, who are you? And I was like, oh, you gotta Google. I'm so sorry, I just can't say it. I can't say. We have this great machine to do these things for us. Well, cool. Other questions?
Well, can I answer?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, because I come from the question asking side
Yes,
as a
perfect.
podcaster.
Yeah.
And I try to focus on you and your artwork when I'm talking to creators. And I think that, yes, being female might interact with how you create your things, but what matters is your mind and how you see the world. And that is not necessarily filtered through gender, but it can be. And I think that for us as the podcasters, some of our more advanced questions are more of how would you take your personal experiences and use that to help other people who want to follow in your footsteps, regardless of gender. Like yesterday I asked Marguerite what she would tell other ladies wanting to get into comics as a fan or as a creator, and I think that that's a really good place to start, morphing from the basic into the more advanced sorts of things.
Yeah.
Just to throw something in there, it's kind of hard to explain, but there's a process of self-censorship that female creators can react to by accident. And you have an impulse to tell a story or write a certain thing, and you're in the flow and you're doing it, and then you suddenly stop yourself because it sounds too female. And that's something that needs to be gone, from our creative process. So it's not just, oh, I'm going to write about female characters or maybe female relationships between different females, which is a great way to expand comics as well, but I'm not going to stop myself from sounding too female in my writing. Like the
And
words
also,
I use.
that can be really commercial too.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is that these things are they are obviously for what's happening with all of your work. It has an audience, and it's exciting for innovative publishers and producers. Very exciting. Okay, who else? Yeah.
Hi. I argue a lot on the internet.
You like the Google.
And one thing that I find a lot of pushback when arguing for more female representation in male-dominated fiction media is this idea of, oh, we're taking away role models for boys.
Is that a thing?
Yes.
But arguing for a female Doctor
Female
Who,
Thor.
or arguing for a female Thor, which just happened and then got canceled quite quickly.
Oh, no, is she canceled?
It's just not coming out.
Massaging the way that they're talking about it. It's for the whole Secret Wars thing. But it's been selling like hotcakes.
Of course.
The other Thor.
Of course.
Thor Classic, as I like to call him. Yes. So it's not Lady Thor, it's just Thor, male Thor. But yeah, so I wondered if you could speak to just the idea that actually female characters can be role models for boys, and maybe talk about if you have any fans who are boys and have had stories about that. I would be really interested to hear.
Well, I've had lots of fans who are male, and they're usually gay, which is cool because I'm a fag hag.
That's a great question. Anyone have any other characters that a guy or audience or fan would respond well to? That's a female.
I did a Viking book. It was hyper violent, and the fan base is almost exclusively guys, but the main characters are girls. So I don't know. They seem to really dig it. I don't know why. They buy it, so I'm not gonna complain.
I mean, this doesn't happen often, but every like once in a blue moon, you'll have a little boy dressed up in a female.
Yes,
You know, I think
yes.
it's adorable.
There's a lot of that here.
Yeah.
It's called
It's cute.
crossplay. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and they just enjoying themselves. They're like, look at me, you know, like you're adorable, you're cute, you know.
And with Harley too, I teach playwriting at Brooklyn High School for the Arts, and there was one kid, he's a fantastic, Michael, wonderful. He obsessed with Harlequin and obsessed with that series, and really found her like a champion. He'd be like, that's what Harley, like he just liked that spunky craziness. So, yeah.
Well, I think as far as the role model goes, it kind of goes back to that discussion of feminism. Feminism is the belief that all genders should be equal. No one is above the other. Everyone can be role models for each other. And I feel like girls look up to male heroes, boys should, if they don't look up to female heroes, everyone can look up to everybody. Because in our media, we have role models, whether we think they're role models or not. They're the things that the kids and teenagers and those of us in formative years, etc., are consuming. And those are the people that we look up to. Who here has not had their life at least slightly altered by a comic book character or a movie or a book? I mean, fictional worlds are, especially in the geek community, what we live in.
They're like little mantras in a way. They're like little journeys that give us hope when we kind of...
Exactly, and if we can't look up to characters of any gender, what's the point?
That's awesome. This is this covers everything. There's a lot of people, so, yes.
Actually, this is now jumping right off of what you were saying of life-altering characters. Who are the writers, who are the characters that you, as consumers of comics and as creators of comics, just that was the character or the storyline or whatever that just changed your life and said, I have to do this, I have to be part of this?
When I was 8 years old, I got my first comic book. It was Punisher. And I loved that.
This all might be kind of telling about all of us.
Yeah,
actually.
I think so.
Because when I lost my first tooth, my first comic book, under my pillow was a Mad magazine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, jump
Batman the Animated Series. 5 years old. I mean, that sold me for the rest of my life. It's actually funny. I actually wildly misinterpreted what Batman was about. So, bear with me. So you've got 5-year-old Marguerite, very attentive to this very scary, at the time I thought it was extremely intimidating. So much of children's television at that point was, so brightly colored and so sanitized. And so this was something that, was scary and intriguing because it was scary. And, you sort of see, the gangsters and some of the other villains in that intro. And then there's Batman, who looks like the scariest and most villainous of all. And so I assumed that he was a bad guy who was atoning for what he had done and was now catching up all the criminals who used to be his allies and turning them in. And I just was convinced of this. I did not connect the murder of the Waynes at all. I was just like, oh, well, he didn't save those people, so that's why he feels bad. But I had this complete narrative. So I feel like a lot of my career is based off of my 5-year-old Marguerite's fan fiction.
Hannah, did you want to jump in?
My example doesn't quite fit. It involves an action figure. I wrote about this when I went to see Days of Future Past premiere, and then I wrote this essay that was incredibly revealing, and I won't take it down, but it is a little embarrassing. Basically, a mislabeled Christmas present, because I have 2 brothers close in age, of Wolverine, an action figure, and I just thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and I wouldn't give it back. Yeah. My whole family worked on me for 24 hours to try to get me to give it back. I hid it. No one could find it. I would not. So it became this thing, why are you trying to take away something that I'm interested in? There's something wrong with this, and so it kind of led to
Do you think it was
further
more
things.
about them being freaked out about you wanting the Wolverine or just wanting to shut up your brother?
My brothers were big superhero fans, and my brother was upset, but also, sibling rivalry,
Right.
that if it's going to be a thing between us, who gets this, we're going to keep fighting, and we're all very strong-willed. So I think I don't know that my parents really disapproved that much. Maybe my father did, because he was a military guy and he had an old-fashioned idea of how women should be in comparison to a more macho men. But my mother, being an educator, she probably didn't have that much of an issue with it. It was more about keeping the peace.
Right.
So, yeah.
Taking care of kids, that was always the most important thing. Never put that damage of this is a boy toy, this is a girl toy.
yeah.
This is what you're allowed to play with.
Can that
so
just
you know.
die already?
Most hardcore My Little Pony fan I ever met was a 3-year-old I took care of. Real boy, he's the best.
Trina, what got you going?
Okay, again, I'm speaking as the voice of the crone here. When I was a kid, there were lots of comics for girls, lots of comics that starred girls. I would take my allowance once a week. I'd go to the candy store. In those days, you could get comics in the corner candy store. You didn't have to go into the dread comic book store. And there'd be a spinner, that said, "Hey, kids, comics," and you'd stand there looking at them all until finally the cranky owner would say, "This isn't a library." And there were so many comics that had girl heroes on the covers. Comics for teenage girls, superheroines, jungle girls. God, I used to play Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. My girlfriend, Judy, just got really tired of it because I always, she always had to be rescued by me. So I had so many comics that I could relate to. I never bought the ones that starred guys. I thought guys were really, really boring. I still think they're boring.
This is amazing. I think for storytelling just in general, I saw the exhibition of Mouse and MoMA. And my mom, this is, before Fred, that's hard to imagine time before Fred. But I, was in the 90s, and I was just, my mom was like, you have to go to this thing, And she's kind of a kookadook. I don't know why she really knew about this. And I was there, and I saw the panels on the wall, and I saw that it was art, and I understood this, and I understood that not everyone understood this. I understood this as special, and that the story was so personal and incredible. So that's where I think I first began. I think comics affected me in terms of theater crossover, which is a long and rich, from Little Abner the musical to Annie. Obviously these are things are meant to go together. Cool. I'm going to actually try to be a little democratic and weave through this way. So I'm looking. Okay, you? Yes, in the green, because I'm going to get back here. Okay. Yes.
Oh, hi. So the local comic store can be really intimidating. I took my 15-year-old sister to get Miss Marvel back home, and I was actually kind of uncomfortable, going in there with her, just how weird it felt. Do you think digital comics being more accessible helps with women getting into comic books? And do you think about that when you're putting them out?
Possibly. I think retailers were afraid of digital comics a couple of years ago, but I think talking to my local retailer, it's gotten, he has 3 times as many people as he had before. So I just think it's opened it up to a wider audience. And you might need a new comic book store. Because a comic book store, a good comic book store should be really welcoming to everybody. It should be really, they should be wanting to make money. From everybody, from families with kids to, just everybody, that's, maybe it's just, that's old school comic store, from the
It's gotten much hipper.
late 70s and 80s,
And
just
that's the
creepy.
comic store back home in California, but one in Colorado Springs is awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
But, okay, that's nice, let's open it up to girls and they can get it on the internet. But they should be able to go into a store and get it, It shouldn't have to be, this is like, I'm trying to think of a simile, I almost think of Islam, where the girls have to just stay home and not go to school. We have the right to go into a comic book store. We shouldn't have to just watch it on the web.
Yeah.
I think digital comics have opened it up to lots of people who may not live close to a comic store or may not have the means to get to the comic store or whatever, and I think that's awesome. But I totally agree that everyone should be welcome in a comic store, and if you're not, find another store.
Yeah.
Where in California are you?
That's in the Sacramento area.
Oh, yeah, I don't know that area.
Oh, I'm going to be there in June for Wizard World.
Do you want the address? You want to go check out that? Hey, is this the creepy couple? Hey. Who next? Okay, I'm gonna go down this aisle. Oh, you want me to start here? Okay. Hi.
I guess this is kind of a two-part question. Have any of you seen Avengers: Age of Ultron? No. Okay, for those that have, I know a lot of people had issues with Black Widow's characterization. I was just wondering what your guys' thoughts were on her storyline, her characterization in that, if you had any issues with her in that movie, and if you did, what would you have done to change it or make it better?
I feel like this is opening up a whole other
This is another panel.
Yeah.
There might be a long panel, but any quick responses from someone who saw it?
I think there were some issues with it, but I feel like it mostly came down to continuity issues and sloppy writing. And I understand what the intent of that scene was, but it didn't work. As far as fixing it, do another editorial pass. Rewrite your dialogue, pass it through some females.
Are you telling Hollywood to work harder?
Yes, I am.
That's the message. Work harder. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, pretty simple fix. Hey ladies, what do you think about this scene? Do some editing, done.
Or make a believable writer justified or come out of the given circumstances, right? A good writing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Good writing thing. Let's keep going now. Yes.
We've seen recently an influx of high-profile, positive characterizations of women in media, like you got your Fury Road. Tomorrowland has a main female protagonist, despite the fact that George Clooney's in all the marketing. You've got Hunger Games out there. There's an influx of just very high-profile projects coming around. Has that affected any of the creators or the journalists opening any doors, closing any doors? A lot of these creative teams are male, so I wanted to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's fun for me because it gives me so much to write about. I personally just get a lot more excitement out of posting a clip of Furiosa than a clip of
I'm gonna marry her. You guys
some guy. So it's good. It opens the conversation. Sometimes we get the dull conversation of, oh, it's a girl. What do you think of that? And instead, I want to go up from the 101 level, like we were talking, right up to, look at the characterization, how awesome it is that it's her actions and her words that are important, and all this stuff. So it's good. It gives me something to start with, at least.
Let's keep going. Very good. Oh, back. Oh, did I miss anyone? Okay. Yes, you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Well, sure. I don't have a glasses on.
Well, how many fingers am I holding up?
Sorry?
How many fingers am I holding up?
2.
That's correct.
My question is not so much as what you guys have gone through in the past, which one I can appreciate both what you guys have gone through and where you guys are right now. I would like to know more for a fact what would you ladies like to do to kind of like put a mark in, like for women ever, more for the fact like what do you guys want to accomplish? What do you guys want to do with your jobs currently? Because it sounds like you guys have a certain passion for each of your positions. And I would like to know more for the fact of what do you guys want to do?
What's the driving goal,
Yeah,
for
not so much as, I know it sounds a little contradictory, I was trying so hard to find a way to put it in a question form, but more for the fact that, like, to put your mark in your guys' specific fields, whether it be podcasting, journalism, artwork, things like that, what do you guys want to do with that to everybody, boys, girls, everything, just to maybe be a potential role model?
Yeah. Do you think about that being role model, or is there something you're trying to achieve? It might change day to day, actually, but is there a larger goal for you guys in your work? I would love to hear that from everybody. I think it's a great question. Whoever wants to jump in.
Mine changes from day to day.
Yeah.
It does. I'm like, one day I'm passionate about something, I'll read about something and I'll be like, we should do something about this. And then, and my guilt is that I'm always feeling, but I gotta finish my work first. But then I have no attention span. So the next day, it's like something new, and and I sort of want to do it all, but I know that's not possible. But I always try, and I think yeah, I think girls and boys who are looking to get into this should just, I think it should be about teaching people not to get discouraged. You know, and even if they feel like they're not good at something, it's better to try than, you know, and fail than to never have tried. I know that's like so, you know, cliche, but
It's so
it
true,
really,
though.
it's really true. Like, if you never try it, you're like, oh, why didn't I at least, you know, oh, you know, you end up with a bigger stomach ache if you don't go for it, you know. And I think encouraging people to do that is a passion of mine. Also, making people laugh. I think that's the thing. That's one constant thing that I want to do every single day is make people
That's
laugh
really
at my
cool.
stuff.
That's really sweet. I love that. And these are amazing goals. And I just love how current they are to what's going on around you. Yeah. Anybody else?
About a year ago, I had I went to a summit, and it was 29 men in the room and me. And walking down that aisle, and everyone looking at me like she doesn't have coffee. What she's doing here? And thinking, God in the garden, let me do enough with my life that my daughter or my niece or any of your daughters or nieces does not have to know what this feels like. Does not have to feel this unwelcome. Let me do enough with my stories. Let me do enough with what, you know, I can contribute to these heroes and this mythology so that they never have to feel that invalid again.
I think for me, the overarching thing I always go for across all of my various creative endeavors, podcasting, webcomic, my own personal fiction writing, is trying to make people think, trying to make people see the world in a different way. You know, with our podcast, we ask some very unusual questions. A lot of them tend to be more on the light side, more fun, but sometimes we get some really in-depth, thought-provoking answers, which is awesome. My webcomic deals a lot with racism and sexism and being on the outside in a fun, fantasy, interesting world, and is from the point of view of two different marginalized characters. In my writing, I tend to have a GLBTQ protagonist and deal with things of that nature just to try and make people open their eyes to these are things that exist in this world. Regardless of whether I'm writing a fantasy or talking to an actual author, again, we create our own realities through our media. And representing these things in the media that people are consuming, my goal is to make people think and hopefully open up their world a little bit more.
It's great. It got into a lot of proactiveness. As a writer, in every meeting, I try to name at least 5 other female emerging writers that I know. And sometimes they don't like that because their eyes are like, oh, too much in my brain. I'm like, but you hear this name now, you're going to hear it tomorrow, you're going to hear it somewhere else. And I know that that's how I got where I am, and you know, that's what's helped me is people talking, you know. So let's keep weaving. Very good. Okay, right there, yeah.
So I do, you know, my attempt at comic journalism, nowhere near your level of guys, but I've been running into a problem increasingly where when you take a creator who basically writes a feminist book or a book that serves a feminist purpose, I suppose they would not call themselves that, and you critique it from, you know, generally an aspect that you could do better. Some creators maybe don't cope with that super well, and that is, by the way, not at anyone on the panel, because I just had a really awesome interaction on that front. But I guess my question is, when you encounter something like that, what I call devastating critique, that's calling for, like, you know, I feel like there should be more, or this aspect doesn't necessarily reflect well on, you know, creating a role model, being a role model, things like that. Do you feel like that's detrimental to you and your, you know, writing, your career image, things like that? Because I've heard that before, and then I at the same time have people who don't approach it that way.
I think it's a really good question, and it can also open up in terms of just, you know, with reviews of your work and critiques of your work. Do you read them? Do you engage? Are you a part of that conversation as well, I would say?
We're going to have to answer quickly. We have 4 minutes left.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think we have the room.
Yeah. Some of it, if the
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we should wrap it up.
Let's wrap
so
it
maybe
up.
just, is there one really quick
Well, I
answer?
certainly read all my reviews. My God, can you imagine not reading your reviews?
Available 5 o'clock if you want to hang out in here and keep talking. I'm just wanting to let you guys know that the floor upstairs closes at 5, so
Yes,
you
we
guys
should
need to
go
run
back
back to your
yes,
tables.
And you don't want to be locked in the convention center either. So, yeah, I read my reviews, and I've been pretty lucky. I haven't gotten any devastating reviews recently. I think if somebody gave me a devastating review, I would read what that person said and see what I agree with and see what I don't agree with, and try to answer them in a civilized manner and have a dialogue with them.
You guys, this has been incredible. We're wrapping it up, right? Do we want to wrap up?
Can I just encourage you, and this is just me, I'm just going to say what I think is true. You have always got to respond as a reader from a point of honesty. And if the reaction it provoked in you was something you feel strongly about, I'm not saying be really horrible and rude to a comics creator because you didn't like their work. I'm saying speak from a point of honesty with humility about yourself, knowing that you aren't God or whatever. And I think that can make a difference, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
Also, live your life with enough conviction that the New Yorker is forced to write snitty articles about you.
Did the New Yorker write a snitty article about? Oh, wow.
Like porn stars. Oh my God.
I didn't know you guys were on the floor.
So yesterday, and I think
I'm my new podcasting friend. What is her name?
Lady also.
Sorry.
Did we get everybody?
I'm here.
Yeah, we got everybody. All right. Ready? I'm going to take a few. Cheese. Magic number is 5. Thank you guys so much. Spread the word that it happened. I got Amanda.
Thanks for putting it together for so long.